Hi everyone, welcome back to Spirit Chats with Kat. If you listened to my last podcast, I was telling you about going to my grandmother's and our family's ancestral home and my experiences there. This one is a little bit of a continuation from that. This picks up after I left my grandmother's house. We moved to a different part of the country, and this is an incident that occurred in the house that we were living in at that time. I do have to preface this by saying, during my life, I've been in places where the experiences occurred very frequently. And then there's been times in my life, I don't know if it's because I lived in a certain place that was less active, or maybe my focus was elsewhere. But the things that I'm used to experiencing happened rarely. So during this period of time, this is where I sort of had a slowdown in the experiences. So we're going to pick the story up after the move and when we moved into a rental home in the South. So this particular day, I had mentioned before that we had some tough situations going on in our life, and this day I was struggling. I was really having a struggle with someone close to me. And so what I ended up doing was going out and sitting on the front deck. And I had been told by this person that I should just leave, and I won't go into more detail than that, but this was my struggle that day. And this was little 4-year-old me trying to figure out what I was going to do when basically I'd been quote unquote evicted. So I'm sitting out on the front porch, and I'm feeling really, really anxious and not knowing where to go or what to do. And sitting there, struggling with the situation. And the next thing I know, I see all these bright lights approaching me. And they approached me very much in a cluster. And I could see them coming from a distance, and they were all different colored lights. Yellow, pink, green, blue, and purple is what I remember. And then as they drew closer, I could hear voices. And it was a bunch of female voices that I heard. And the energy that I was getting also was female. And they were concerned. I could hear concern in their voices. And they were just having a major discussion over me. I don't remember exactly what they were saying, but I could hear in their voices that they felt very anxious about my situation as well, and they wanted to do something to help me, but there was concern as to what exactly they should do. So I told you that the voices that I heard were voices that I recognized. There were voices I recognized and also some that I didn't recognize, but the ones that I did recognize had been there after I died. So I realized that these were my ancestors that were coming. And once they came to me, I, in my mind, could see two females that were having the major part of the discussion was between two females. One was my guide. I call her my guide. I know she's one of my ancestors. If I could have remembered her name, I could have done some research and I would know for sure. But she's somebody that, regardless, is very close to me. I feel close to her in my heart because she watched over me during some very difficult periods in my life. This being one of them, my death being one of them. And there have been other times as well, which we'll discuss in later podcasts. So, if you remember my description of her, she had dark hair, thick dark hair, piled on top of her head in a loose bun, a black dress with white lace around the collar and white lace around the sleeves. And she was speaking to a thin woman, older, with gray hair and a gray dress made similarly, but just a little different in the sense that the lace around the collars and the neckline it was scalloped lace. And this lady, her hair also was piled on top of her head. It was gray, and her face was pointed. I remember her just having a very sharp nose, which in my 4-year-old mind just completely matched the sharp tone of her voice. And she was arguing with my other ancestor, my guide, my heart. She was arguing with her about whether they should even be doing this. And I remember her saying, "You know what the rules are. We're not allowed to intervene." And when the lights came up to me as I was sitting on the porch, they surrounded me, and I felt like I was receiving a hug. I just all of a sudden felt really warm and protected and loved. And, I started to calm down a bit. So after a few minutes, again, I'm 4 years old, time management, not one of my strong suits at that point in time. So, I don't know how long it was. It felt like it was a short period of time, just long enough for them to come and give me a hug. But, there was the issue of whether they were supposed to be doing this or not. They wanted me to know that I was loved and they were watching out for me, but how much they could step in and intervene was an issue for them. So after a few minutes of the love and affection I was receiving, my guide spoke to the other lady with the sharp voice, and she said to her, "Look, I understand. I will take responsibility for it. You and anyone that is nervous about staying can go." So everyone left, which, I don't hold that against them because apparently there are rules there. I mean, me having to come back, I feel like that was one of the rules. So they do have rules there that they had to follow. And there was some anxiety among the ladies as to would they get in trouble with our, you could, if you remember the male that I described in my Genesis podcast, they felt like they would get in trouble with him if they were to get caught. So for whatever reason, though, my guide chose to stay with me. And as they left, the lady in gray gave my guide a warning. And she said, you know what's going to happen if you get caught. And that did not ruffle my guide at all. She just calmly said to her, yes, I know. Don't worry about it. I will handle it. So, again, I feel like she has some place in hierarchy within my ancestors, just as much as the male has a place in hierarchy, and she was not intimidated. And she felt like she was willing to take the risk to stay with me and comfort me and do what she could for me. Because to her, I got the feeling that to her, I was worth her taking that risk. So when the ladies left, I felt the removal of their love and affection. I felt it slowly receding. And she just said to me very sweetly, very softly and calmly, don't worry, honey. I'm going to stay with you until your mother comes home. And I remember saying to her, but what if I get in trouble when she comes home because I'm not supposed to be here anymore? And at that point in time, she said to me, you know, so-and-so is being ridiculous. You have every right to be here. And your mother is not going to be angry that you're here. Just trust me. Just trust me. Everything will be okay. So I sat there and she sat with me. And I just remember chattering to her, you know, like a 4-year-old would. I don't remember what I was talking about, just mundane things. As she, you know, like anyone that loves a child, she just listened to my chatter and made me feel like she cared about what I had to say. It could have even been nonsensical stuff I was talking about. I don't know. But, you know, I just remember that feeling, you know, that I was just sitting there swinging my legs and blah, 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 blah. And I remember feeling that she was listening to me as if what I was saying was important, which it probably wasn't because I was 4. But, you know, we don't need to let 4-year-olds know that. Let's let them feel important. So anyway, you know, eventually, just as she said, my mother came home and she walked up to me on the porch and she said, "What are you doing out here? Come on, let's go inside." And she said, "You don't need to be out here in the dark." And because at that point it was dark, and I said, okay, you know, and went inside. So that was my ancestors coming to check up on me and make sure that everything is okay. And, you know, I know, especially in North American culture, I don't even know if that's the correct way to phrase it, but let's just say in the culture that I grew up in, the thought of ancestors being there for us is not common. We don't necessarily teach our children that, you know, because it seems like this country has been more focused on Jesus Christ and God and angels and things like that. But again, as I said in the Genesis episode, my Genesis episode, that wasn't what occurred for me when I died. And so that was a shock to me. But there are so many other cultures that know that our ancestors are there for us, and they pay homage to our ancestors. And to me, it makes me sad that we've lost that. You know, again, why can't this coexist with religion? Why does it have to be a fringe type thing, you know? Because as I came to understand over the course of my life, they really are there for us. So this was I would say the second time that my ancestors had come to visit me since I had been back alive on this planet. So, you know, for the longest time too, I think because I am, you know, some of the Celtic beliefs had been passed down to me. I felt like these were fairies coming to visit me because they were all brightly colored lights and they were approaching me, and, you know, and my first thought was, oh, why are fairies coming? But then as I began to work through things and, you know, as I got older and I got more visits and they didn't approach me in the light form, I began to realize that it wasn't fairies that approached me, that the voices I heard were ancestral voices. So why they approached me in the form of lights at that point, I really don't know. Because I had seen them before, you know, so I really don't know why they chose that form that day. But I am so appreciative of them. You know, the times that they have come to me and they have given me love and protected me, whatever form they want to take, I'm open to it. You know, I just appreciate them being there for me. So, that is another experience that I've had with my ancestors that occurred shortly after I had passed away and returned. So thank you for listening, and stay tuned for my next podcast. It's pretty action-packed, the next one, because this next location, I had a significant amount of experiences occur. So you'll kind of see what I mean by some periods in my life have been slower, some have been more active, whether it's terrain, whether it's the house itself that we lived in, whether it was my circumstances, or whether it was just that my focus was on other things. I can't really say, but there's been an ebb and flow in my life with the visits. So yeah, definitely stay tuned for the next one because it's pretty action-packed, and I'll throw some ideas out there for you all and give you something else to think about as well, some interesting things to think about. So thanks for joining me this time, and I'll see you on the next podcast.